guys, I'm Alicia Davis.
And I'm Trio Springer. And this podcast is a whole bunch of real life. Yes, life as a woman and a mom can be hard sometimes. We totally get it.
We've learned that discovering our unique talents and remembering our potential gives us the ability to tap into our own power, and it's amazing. Plus, it's always better to journey through life with a sis, right?
Right. Sis, you have more power and potential than you realize.
We see you and we believe in you. You've got this, sis.
Hey guys, welcome to You've Got This Sis this week. We're so excited that you're here with us. Alicia, what's up, my friend?
Oh, you know, all the stuff.
All the stuff.
Going on. It's a glorious mess sometimes, but it's good.
It is good. And we are still in COVID. And so we are celebrating that we are here with you because it's where we love to be. And we have a special guest with us today. Her name is Kathryn Randall, and she is a great friend of ours that we have known since college. And we are excited to bring her on to sis with us and for you to hear a little bit of her story. She is a military wife, an Air Force wife. She's also a mom of 4 kids. Right, Kathryn?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm like, do I need to add in any or take any away? Okay. So 4 kids, and she's an amazing woman who loves exercise. That's her passion, and fitness. And she leads fitness classes, usually wherever she is stationed with her husband. So, we're going to learn a little bit more about Kathryn as we go this morning. So, Kathryn, welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have to say something. Because Kathryn and I knew each other since our sophomore or junior years of college, something like that.
I think so.
And we were on a dance team together at BYU, and that's how we met. And we actually were present and friends with each other when each of us was dating and got engaged and married. And we could share some really super funny stories. And the one that I wanted to share, and this is so hilarious. My husband might not like me sharing this, Kathryn, but do you remember when we were at a rehearsal and the guys on the team were wearing a certain costume? And the costumes that were selected for them were actually too small. So they were all kind of too tight in their pants area. And my future husband was one of the people who was wearing the pants that were too tight. Do you remember this, Kathryn?
No. When was this?
Oh my gosh, this is so funny.
Don't.
So we were watching, there were 5 or 6 of them doing this particular dance. And we were watching them and I was like, oh my gosh, Jacob's got a really cute butt. And you were laughing at me, laughing hysterically. And I forgot about that until we got engaged. And you were like, oh my gosh, do you remember that do you remember you said he had a really cute butt? And I was like, I totally forgot about that. So that's one of my favorite memories with you.
That is so funny.
Super real and super tight friends in college. And that's one of the reasons that I love you, is because we have those bonds like that from college. So I'm super glad that you're on the podcast today.
Oh my goodness. I can't believe I don't remember that.
But enough about that. I want to get into you. So tell us a little bit about kind of like an overview of your experience with the military, with your husband, and where you've been stationed, and kind of the overview.
Oh, that's a long story.
I know.
Do you want the long or the short version?
Well, let's start with how you even got introduced to the military, because did you guys meet there at college, Kathryn?
Mm-hmm. Yep. We were on one of the folk dance teams together. So we met not because we were partnered together, because he's tall and I'm short, but it was just by chance one night that we met, and he was doing ROTC at BYU. So we knew that the Air Force life was kind of our destiny, which frightened me beyond my imagination because I don't have a family history of the military. So I actually had to I was emailing a chaplain that my husband was emailing, and I asked this chaplain, and my husband didn't know, Trig at the time, he wasn't my husband, but I asked him, I said, what am I getting myself into if I marry this man who's going into the Air Force? And the chaplain was so sweet, and he emailed back and just had all these wonderful things to say about the Air Force and the way that it was so good for his family. And I felt so comforted by that email that as my husband and I, well, my future husband, as we got closer to the whole, should we get married, should we not? I felt like I can do this Air Force thing. Somebody said it was really good. They've had great success, so I think we'll be okay. So yes, we knew when we dated and got married that the Air Force was going to be our life. And there we go.
And it is. And so you and Trig got married. And then once you guys were married and he graduated, you guys both graduated, where was your next stop? Like, what was the next thing in this process?
So when he graduated knowing he had received a pilot training slot, meaning he was selected to go be a pilot for the Air Force. So when we graduated,
Is that hard?
We knew that was part of the process. It, by the way, honestly depends. It depends on the year. There's always a different number of pilot slots that they release to the ROTC programs. And it just happened to be a year that they released a lot of slots. So there were 11 people graduating with him, and they released 10 pilot slots. So he got one. It was not even the plan in the beginning. It was something that happened. And we know that it was part of our plan, our life plan, because it happened in a way that we couldn't have predicted it. So we knew pilot training was going to be what we were going to do.
So where did you go for that?
Well, so back then you had to wait to get into pilot training. So we had a little bit of a time period of waiting. We went to Mountain Home Air Force Base he went as what was called a casual officer, meaning he was just going to sit around this Air Force base and do whatever odd jobs they gave him. And he was supposed to be there for 6 months doing odd jobs and then go to his pilot training down in Texas.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's the wow is I was 8 months pregnant with our first baby when we moved to Mountain Home Air Force Base. So I'm, largely pregnant, and I'm just going to go to this Air Force base and have a baby. So we get there. 3 weeks later, I have my baby. And 2 weeks later, the Air Force calls him up and says, "Hey, we've got a pilot slot open. Can you be here in 2 weeks?" And he said, "My wife just had a baby by C-section. How about I come in 4 weeks?" And so they said, "Okay." So 2 months after we moved to Mountain Home Air Force Base, we moved again and down to Del Rio, Texas, to Laughlin Air Force Base for him to start pilot training.
Wow.
What was that like for you?
Yeah. Well, I didn't know any better. I was like, sure, it's the Air Force. This is what we do. So, yeah.
In some ways, it was probably good to just be a little naive, right? And go with the flow.
Oh, yeah, totally. Because if you don't know, you just think it's fine. I mean, we didn't have tons of stuff. So the moving process was not very rigorous. The movers were blessed to be able to have movers that come in and pack up stuff. So they came in, packed up our stuff, and we were on our way to Texas with our month-old baby.
That's crazy cool. So you guys were always together, though? Like, even when he went to this first base where he was maybe going to be there for 6 months, you guys were still together?
We have always decided that we were doing everything together, regardless of how short the time period was going to be. So yeah, we did it all together. So 2 months in Mountain Home, and then in Del Rio, he started pilot training, which is normally a year long, but he did at 6 months, they do what they call track select, and you're selected to either go fly the trainer plane that takes you to the fighter planes, the trainer plane that leads you to the cargo planes, and the trainer plane that actually leads you to a special cargo plane. And we had to move 8 months after we got to Del Rio, Texas. We moved to Corpus Christi, Texas, where he completed his pilot training with a different aircraft, and he completed that training with the Navy. So we've done, 3 moves.
So after you tell us all the different tracks that are available, what did he end up doing?
So he ended up flying what's called the C-130. So they have a trainer called the T-44 or the C-12. They're just both trainer planes to prepare you to fly. This was back in the day. So anybody listening now would be like, that's not how it works. Hey, 20 years ago, this is how it worked. And
That's
so
right.
he was
I like
preparing
that.
to fly. Yeah, I'm old. I'm an old Air Force soul.
Hey, if you're old, that makes the rest of us old too. I don't know if I'm cool.
We're all old. I'm sorry, you guys.
Whatever. We are not old. We are very, she doesn't even have wrinkles, you guys. If you could see her,
Oh no.
she doesn't even
I'm in the
really have a
shadows.
gray hair. Like, no, don't believe her when she says she's old. She's been a military wife for 20 years and very young. So she can still kick some booty when she needs to because she's got 4 kids. So, all right, we're not old here, Kathryn.
Oh, okay.
You are wise, but you're not old.
Okay, I will be the wise Air Force spouse soul.
Yeah.
So,
tell us how it was and is, and this will be good.
Yeah, it's so different. I'll tell you, it is a different world from the Air Force we came into. But that being said, we did do that weird training that took us to another place for 8 months. And then he had to go and train specifically in the C-130 aircraft, and that was in Little Rock, Arkansas. And we were there for 6 months.
Okay.
So,
did you have any international stations that you were at?
Yeah. So that comes next. So he had to get through all of the pilot training first, and then he could start into, I guess, what you could call a real assignment. And our first real assignment was Yokota Air Base, and that's in Tokyo, Japan.
Wow.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How was Japan?
Oh, it's amazing. Amazing. And we have been trying to get back for, when did we leave there? 2006. So 14 years. We have been trying. Every time he gets reassigned, we ask if we can go there. We have not yet succeeded in going back. We're still hopeful after this assignment that we can pull it off, because it's a great place.
How long were you there?
We were there for 3 years.
Really?
Yeah, 3 full years. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit about that then, because if none of us have really been abroad or lived in another country, like, how is that for your kids? Were they in school yet?
No, so we moved there when my oldest was 2 and my second, she was only 8 months old. So they were just babies. And we lived on base, which is different because when you're living on a base, you're kind of in a little piece of America. And then when you choose to, you drive out the gate and then you're in Japan. And we were lucky because Trig served his mission in Japan. He already spoke Japanese. So for us to go out into the community, we already had that communication that was easier because he would just speak Japanese with them. But we did venture out all the time. We went as many places as we could when we were together. Now, when Trig was gone, I didn't really go off base very much because it was harder for me to take the 2 kids places without him because, the double stroller, everything's pretty narrow there. I couldn't really just take them out on the subway with the double stroller because you can't physically navigate the system with 2 little kids on your own. So it was mostly when he was home that we would adventure as many places as we could.
Wow. So what's your favorite thing about your time that you lived in Japan? And you can have a few, like maybe it can be food related, culture related, all the different little categories that make living awesome.
Right. So if you ever go to Japan, you're going to find that the Japanese people are genuinely a very kind culture. They're so pleasant to be. As a foreigner who doesn't speak Japanese, they're actually very accommodating, and they apologize that you can't communicate with them, even though it's my fault as an American that I cannot speak the language of the land I'm living in. But they're just so kind. And the best example was the McDonald's that was down the street by the subway station, and they wear nice McDonald's uniforms. The women wear pantyhose and high heels to be at McDonald's.
Wow.
And they give you your food. I know, like, it's insane. They give you your food and they bow to you, and it's crazy how nice the people are. And it's really interesting because we lived on the American base, and I would lock my doors and my car doors, all living on the base around the Americans. But we would go drive into Tokyo at night sometimes and be like, don't bother locking the doors. It's fine. It's safe. So they're just a very kind culture. We really enjoyed that.
Seems like there's a sense of respect too within the culture that even, respect for other, cultures or other people. That's really neat. I think that's great.
Kathryn, did you find it hard to come back to the States after living in a people that are so kind and respectful?
Oh my goodness, yes. One of the first times that I flew back to the States, and maybe it was about a year after we moved there, I had flown back just with my younger kids. And we flew into, I want to say it was LAX, and we were walking through the airport, and I'm holding my kids like, these people are going to try and take my children. They're so scary. What have I done? I left the country of safety, which is Japan, and come to America. This is frightening. So yes, it was really weird to come back.
I think that's interesting too, and an interesting in a way concept, because when I visited Brazil with my husband, and we've visited a few other countries now at this point in our life. But I find it really interesting how when we go to the other countries, just like you're talking about, they're very friendly, very kind, most of them. But for those individuals coming to America to visit, some of their first interactions or experiences of America are on the flight here.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot say that all of those that I've seen are positive or pleasant. And I just feel so sad. Like, even for people to go through customs here in America, it's very cold.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, it's so sad. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. Not that we can change all of that, but I think to recognize how nice it is to be welcomed into another country, and how maybe we as individuals can do that ourselves, because we can't change customs here, but we can do what we can, right?
Yeah.
So,
yes,
exactly. I have a random question. I want to gather stats. How many times have you moved in the 20 years you guys have been in? How many of your stations have been international, and how many stateside? And then one other question after that. Sorry, I don't want to overlap.
Okay, so we've been in, we'll do this math. So we've been in for, I guess, almost 20 years. We've moved 12 times, but in the 12 different station to station moves, we've actually lived in 14 different houses, because there were a couple places where we had to switch houses. But then I was doing the math with, that can't be right. Maybe it is right. Maybe we've moved 13 times. Dang it, I'm going to have to count. But I know for sure that in the 21 years that my husband and I have been married, we've lived in 17 different homes. So 17 different places that we've had to set up as our home. Unpacking the kitchen dishes is the worst.
Yes. And I have a question now related to that. With so many moves, how do you keep your family grounded to having a sense of home?
Good question.
Oh, that is like the question of the day, right? Because it's a hard thing that you have to uproot yourselves. Not just, my husband and I made this choice together that we would do this, but then we had kids, and we brought the kids into the whole mess of it. And every time we move, we have to reestablish ourselves out in the community. But obviously the one thing we always have is each other. So no matter what, we've always been together as a family, whether the kids like it or not. Like, you've got us, sorry, you're stuck with us. So that's really the common factor in it all, is we've always done it together. And then the friends, we slowly get into the community, we get activities for the kids, and we get established with friends. And then obviously our church community always plays a big factor in how stable we feel in that new environment.
Well, and your attitudes too. You and Trig, your husband, I know him a little bit, obviously not as well as you do, but he's easygoing, and he laughs, and he kind of just takes things at face value and just goes with it. He's less stressed about things. So it seems like your attitude, your approach towards these moves and these challenges that some of us would find completely overwhelming, your attitude and your approach towards it are probably what help ground your kids too. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, if you ever met my husband, he's like sickeningly optimistic, which
Yes.
I know that's not a bad thing. Like, he is the most happy person you will ever meet. And
Yeah.
anytime he says he's struggling with something, I'm like, dude, who are you? You're not my husband. He's the nicest guy, and he always has this really good outlook on life. And for that, I am very blessed to be married to him. And obviously, we wouldn't be able to handle the whole Air Force life if he didn't have that sort of attitude. And then I just get to play off of it. I'm more of the pessimist, so we kind of balance each other out. And sometimes I can be optimistic and sometimes I can be a real downer. But the thing is that together we've been able to mostly keep a good attitude about it. Now, as far as our kids, they don't always have the best attitude about it. I think they'll learn to appreciate their experiences later when they're older and they can look back on it. But it hasn't always been easy for them. And there are definitely days that I've thought, oh, I'm so sorry, children. This is what I've done to you. But I know that it probably will come back to be more of a benefit to them once they can look back on it with fond memories and not their current, I hate this memories.
So
Right.
I got another question too, because you actually know my sister, my older sister, because my older sister's husband is in the Coast Guard, and I had no idea, but you guys were actually stationed in New Jersey at the same time. And so you met my sister, and I think you guys were living there for months before I even knew that. But my sister has often felt like she has had to operate as a single mom because her husband's role in military. Have you felt like that too? I mean, you talk about being unified with Trig and doing this together, but have there been times where you felt that you've had to do it on your own?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Now, as a pilot, the pilots have a different kind of life where they do deploy, and depending on what plane you fly and what time of the world it is, those deployments can vary in length. But a pilot tends to just come and go all the time. So not that they're gone for long stretches of time, but their schedule is very unknown. So it's dependent on the current need for missions in the world. It's dependent on available aircraft. And then aircrafts always have maintenance issues, and that affects whether they leave when they are supposed to, whether they come back when they're supposed to. So the first thing I had to learn in Japan when I was home with my toddlers was that there is no stability in the Air Force life as a pilot. And I was a single mom most of the time. And that was a hard 3 years, in the fact that that's when I had to learn how to function on my own as a single mom, and then be grateful for the times when he was home, and then just be like super flexible about everything, because who knew? I never knew. Was he really going to leave when he was supposed to leave? Was he really going to come home when he was supposed to come home? I didn't know. And it did that was a lot of growing pains to learn how to function on my own as a mom without him home.
You are like the ultimate definition of being seaweed. We've talked about that on a different podcast, but that's exactly what you had to learn in those 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
You are seaweed.
Well, and I love, Kathryn, that you acknowledged that it was a journey, that you had to learn that. It's not something that it doesn't sound like it came easy. And I think sometimes as women, we can get frustrated with ourselves or kick ourselves even further down than we should be, because why can't we just be supportive of this great thing that our husband's doing? Why can't we just, all of those things? And so I think for you to acknowledge that it was a process, and that, you had to acknowledge and really strive to be happy and grateful for, all that you had, and look at it, I think, in a different perspective, a different light. Is there a certain time that you can remember that you just kind of flipped that switch, and it, that led you on that different perspective and outlook from then on?
Yeah, we actually were really blessed to have some really great neighbors, and we were in a fourplex building, and then across the street, the whole base was like a bunch of fourplexes. So we had a friend in the same fourplex, another one across the street. And the fact that I had these other women that knew exactly what I was going through, and our kids were the same age, and we would get out and play, and to see them, they were a little bit more experienced in the Air Force life. So to see them and their example and how they handled it was definitely a way that I could change my mind too, because their support and their encouragement and their example showed me that this is not a terrible life. It's okay. You can be a single mom and make decisions. Totally fine. You can do that. And that was really nice to be able to learn that. And I'm grateful I learned it so early on in our very first assignment, because the pilot life just keeps on going. It doesn't, it's the way it always is. So I'm glad I learned it a long time ago, because it's definitely made the last 16 years a lot more bearable.
So there's two things with what you just shared and that I want to honor and point out. And that is, as you look to the other Air Force wives and you found really safety and unity and that collaboration with them, and you had their example of, if they can do this, I can do this too. And I think that's what we're about here. And that's why we're trying to highlight so many different women and so many different stories, because collectively we can all be examples and support one another. And the other thing I want to honor too is that you stepped into the role of needing to function as a single mother, but not holding resentment towards your husband. Like, I can tell that when you talk about him, that you love him like crazy. He's your best friend, but you don't resent him for needing to be the single mom and to fill that space sometimes when he was gone. And I think that's a really important point to make, because we can easily fall into resentment for having to sometimes step into those bigger shoes, or maybe the things that we don't want to do, but that need to be done. And there's probably two choices, right? We can do it begrudgingly, or we can do it and be glad about it. And so I love the examples that you just shared, because they fulfill two really important messages. There is, let's collectively grow and support each other in this. You've got this community, because we're all working on getting it, and we all need each other to get it. And also be careful of the resentment that you hold towards others, especially others who are so close to you in your life and that do love you. And maybe see what perspective change could do. So thank you, Kathryn, for sharing that. That really touched my heart. Thank you.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Having 20 years of experience in the military as a wife, not as an actual, I should clarify that. Having 20 years of experience as a military wife, what would you tell other women who have the potential to marry someone who's going into military, or have already married someone who has made the decision to join the military? What would you share with them?
This actually comes from what Trio just said, and it made me think about the fact that I don't resent Trig for what he does, because we decided together that this was going to be our life. And I know that if a wife goes into it with her husband, or any spouse, a husband with a wife who maybe is active duty military, if you don't go into it knowing that you're going to do this journey together, then you're probably not going to be very successful in your Air Force or military time. You have to go in together holding hands. It's going to be hard for both of you. It's not like Trig loves to go away from his family. Yes, he likes to go travel, and yes, he's been a lot of really, really awesome places that makes me a little bit sad that I don't get to go with him. But I don't resent him. But the same way with anybody else, right? If you can't be on the same page and accept the fact that this is your lifestyle, for better or worse, in thick and thin, whatever, then it's going to be a hard journey for you. You're going to resent each other in some way. It's just human nature. So go in together. If you're going to do this Air Force journey, if you're already in, then get on the same page,
Mm.
hold each other's hands, and walk this journey together. Listen to each other, because you're both going to have struggles. And then if you're thinking about going in, my answer is do it together. One way or the other, you have to decide. But you have to decide together. Otherwise, it's just, you're not going to make it. It's going to be too hard.
So all in together.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
I love that.
I like that.
Kathryn, thank you for being here with us today. You're awesome. And I love that you're able to speak to those women who are spouses or who are in the military, because we have so many, and we're so grateful for those that serve our country, law enforcement, military, everybody. Like, thank you. And it's so important. And I love too that, I mean, there's so many different communities that we have to find support in. And the fact that there is the Air Force women spouses, you know, and that's really cool. So I know that you guys have a whole, I think, understanding within that community too, just like the Coast Guard spouses and the Army spouses and Navy. It's all a little bit different, even though it's the same idea, but just finding your people that get you too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's awesome.
Thanks for sharing.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Kathryn. So, all right. We're going to tell you guys that you got this week. Go win your day. And from all of us here, you've got this, sis.
Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts or suggestions for future episodes. Visit us on Facebook or Instagram, and be sure to share some of your own personal wins so we can celebrate along with you.
And don't forget to click on the 3 dots below to share this episode with a friend who's on your heart today. Go win your day, sis. We love you.